All right, welcome everybody. We should be live. Thank you for joining us. If you are watching on our website or YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform you're on, please let us know in the comments if you can hear us okay and see us okay. And throughout the event today, the workshop, make sure you ask questions and just leave them in the comments. If you're on our website, you'll see a little chat there that you can ask the questions to, and that's going to come right to my phone. So I'll be able to reply back. If you have any trouble, just let me know. And we're super excited to do the workshop today. We have an amazing founder himself, but also lawyer. Jesse is with us. I'm going to bring Jesse up here. Jesse, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. We're super pumped about the workshop today, and I know you're going to get into a lot of interesting details with VC and angel financing and just fundraising in general. So if throughout the presentation, I'm gonna be kind of in the background. I'm gonna give the floor to Jesse and let him do his thing. And but I'll be replying back to people if you guys. Okay, so we have some stuff coming through on the chat. If you guys have questions, reply on whatever social platform you're watching it or on our website. I'll be replying back. We're mostly going to be saving the questions for the end. But if you ask a question during the presentation, during the workshop, and it's very relevant to what he's talking about, then I'll jump in and we'll answer that question right there and then, so that it's right on mind. But to start things off, Jesse, I'd love to have you give everyone, just a background on yourself. Tell everyone, what made you want to, become a lawyer. Why do you start Fourscore, and tell us more about the law firm and what you guys specialize in.
Yeah, sure. So let me give you the sort of the quick background. I have maybe the first two slides on the deck are a little bit about us, but so we're a small team of 5 full-time people. We've got a handful of other folks that hop in on part-time assignments. Most of us are located in the Triangle region of North Carolina, which is Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. But we do have two folks out on the West Coast as well. Oh, there's the screen up. Perfect. So
that'd be easiest since you have some info on there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So let me kind of start with this slide. A lot you'll hear throughout the presentation. We'll talk about why things happen, or why people might do something, investors or founders. And so I always like to start sort of with the Fourscore why, which is, we believe that ideas deserve opportunity. And that kind of leads us to work with a lot of early stage companies, but it's not necessarily only early stage. We have a lot of mature businesses as well that the common thread between those tend to be that they are innovative in some way, or they're trying to figure out a better way to do what they do. The principles we kind of live by, work by, we try to simplify the complex, meet expectations on pricing, provide superior work quality, respond swiftly. Those are the things that we try to bring into every interaction with our clients and the people that we work with. And our mission really is to serve our clients and our communities while we change the public perception of lawyers doing what we do. So that's sort of the why and a little bit of background on Fourscore. Let me give you just a couple of ideas on what we actually do. We're a corporate law firm. We primarily do 3 things. So we spend a lot of time representing companies and investors in venture and angel financing deals. Probably about 60 or 70% of our deals will represent the company, and the rest we have a handful of investors that we represent. We also do merger and acquisitions work, so we represent buyers and sellers of businesses, whether they're our clients that are exiting or they're acquiring to grow further, whatever the case may be. And then we serve as outside general counsel for companies that you don't need to hire a full-time attorney. That's pretty broad. We do all kinds of agreements, from employment stuff to licenses to equity compensation, or anything else you can really think of. We're not patent lawyers, we're not tax lawyers, we're not litigators, but if it's business related, we usually can help or find the right person. So that's kind of the spiel from me, and then we'll kind of hop into the actual content for tonight.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I've got about 10 slides. We'll probably take about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, 25 minutes to go through these. And like Michael said, if you've got questions, throw them up there on the comments, and we'll either do that at the end, or if we need to stop, we can do that as well. So we'll start with why. So some reasons for why founders would go out and raise money and try to get outside capital. There's more than three, but I've got three that I see a lot. One is speed. And so a lot of businesses, especially, tech-based companies, don't have the luxury necessarily to wait for their revenue to, exceed their expenses and be able to grow organically. So a lot of times there's a speed to market issue that needs to be dealt with by bringing in outside capital. Another reason is validation. If you're a founder and you can get a professional investor to put money into your company, that's going to give a certain impression to other investors and other people in the market that maybe what you're doing. And that's not necessarily always a good thing, but it is reality. And sometimes these companies, you may need validation in addition to whatever potential customer validation or market validation you're getting. Bringing in an investor who has done this before and sees something valuable in your business can give you some validation as well. And then third, probably not the most exciting or desirable reason would be survival. Especially in times like we're dealing with right now. It's not uncommon to see companies that are kind of running out of the capital that they need to get to the next spot. And you don't really want to end up in that position because you don't have a lot of leverage. But at the same time, if you're basically handed a decision of, shut it down now or take the deal that's available, most people will continue to fight and kind of move forward and try to do it that way. So survival is another reason. Moving on to the next slide here is basically strategy and figuring out, okay, now why you're doing this, but let's make sure that actually lines up with what investors would be looking for, and really that your interest as a founder will line up with what the investor wants is very, very important. So it's always important to consider, what are you really trying to build? Are you building a company that you intend to grow to a certain level and then exit within 5 to 8 years or so? Or are you really trying to build something that's going to be longer lasting than that? Most venture investor type people are going to be looking for an exit in that 5 to 8, 9 year time frame. So if that doesn't really line up with what you want, you might be barking up the wrong tree, and you don't want to do that. Next is, do you really need the outside capital to get there? Not to disparage any of our investor clients at all. A lot of businesses that are super successful and valuable to the economy and our communities wouldn't happen without investors. So it's super important to have them. But if I was a founder of a tech startup, I would do everything I can to try not to bring in that additional money unless it's really, really necessary. And if it is necessary, you want to make sure that you're bringing in the right people that have value beyond the dollars that are going to help you in multiple ways. And so figuring out if you really actually need the capital to get to whatever your end game is very, very important at the beginning before you start, really getting involved with investors or anyone else. And we could talk about that more, but I mean, investors really become your partners, and so you need to make sure that your interests are aligned and they're the right people for you, and you're the right business for them. And then if you sort of decide, yes, we do need investment money, we know what we're trying to do, it lines up with what investors want, it's very important to understand how much money you need in order to get to the next, the next inflection point is what I have on the slide. But basically that next spot in your journey where you're going to raise more money, you got to sort of backfill for how much cash you're going to need to get there. You don't want to do too little, because that will end up putting you in that, if we go back a slide and look at the reasons for why, it's going to put you in sort of a desperate position where you're raising money to survive, which you don't really want to do. If you raise too much money, then you're selling the company at a lower value, and you're really kind of, shooting yourself in the foot. And so you want to get a pretty good idea of how much money you want to raise in each round to get you to your next milestone, next stopping point. Some places or sources of funds and their potential motivations. People have all different kinds of reasons for doing what they do, like I mentioned. But a lot of companies, a lot of founders raise their first round of financing from friends and family. There are options for crowdfunding that are still relatively new, are not necessarily they just weren't available. Those options for crowdfunding weren't necessarily available 5 years ago or so. Then you have angel investors, which historically at least tend to be kind of earlier stage, maybe smaller investment amounts, versus venture capital funds, which are you sort of think of them as writing bigger checks or maybe later stage investors. But the line between angel investors and venture capital investors is not it's not super crisp anymore. Angel investors can be individual people. There are angel funds, there are angel groups, but typically they do tend to be earlier stage investors, where your venture capitalists will put money into early stages depending on what their goal is, but would also be there at least for the later stages. Banks are always a possibility, although for early stage companies they're not much of a possibility. Banks are not normally willing to take that much risk in providing loans. The government, there are a lot of federal and state and also private grant programs, especially if your company does anything with R&D. That's there are tons of grants out there, which is a great option, especially at the earliest stages. And then savings, which a lot of people get to the point where they want to save their company and they end up using 401k money and putting another mortgage on their house. And it's really important to think through the repercussions of doing that. There are stories, there are success stories and horror stories alike on both sides of that line there. So, but that is another possibility of a financing source. Okay, a quick overview of the type of financing securities that we're going to talk about, and then we'll dive into each of those a little bit more in depth. Grants, as I mentioned, they are great because they're not dilutive. So nothing goes on your cap chart. You don't have to repay anything. A lot of people refer to grants basically as free money. Nothing is really free. There's always some kind of strings attached, but grants are a great option for early stage businesses. Equity, you've got preferred stock and common stock. It's pretty unusual to sell investors common stock, although it does happen. But it's far more normal to see investors buying preferred stock from early stage companies. We'll get into the details of preferred stock in a bit. Well, let's skip over and talk about debt. There may be an opportunity to use like conventional debt, but like I said, banks typically won't provide loans to super early stage companies. So convertible debt is a very common and usual way to raise your first round of financing. And then other types of convertible debt or convertible securities like safes. SAFE is an acronym. They've been around for probably about 5 or 6 years. Several different flavors that we can get into, but SAFE is an acronym. It stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. There are or were other types of convertible securities around. I haven't. There was one I remember just because the acronym was funny. It was a KISS. It was a Keep It Simple Security. I don't remember who came up with that, and I haven't seen it in a long time. But safes are alive and well. We use those all the time on both sides of the deals that we do. Okay, so now we're going to dive into a few slides that go into a little bit more in depth on these different types of securities. Like I said, just keep putting those questions in the comments, and we'll get to those. So preferred stock, we'll start with that. The main concepts on preferred stock is that, number one, there has to be a current value of the company in order to strike the terms of a preferred stock deal. So you might hear the terms like pre-money or post-money. The pre-money value of a company is just the value of the business prior to the financing closing. The post-money valuation is the value of the company after the financing closes. And ideally, the post-money should equal the pre-money plus the new money that's coming in. So you're going to have a valuation. A lot of people ask, well, how do we know, this is a super early stage business. Maybe you don't even have revenue yet. So how in the world do we know what the value of the company is? If it is that early, frankly, it becomes sort of a negotiation amongst the lead investor and the founders about, just a number. As a founder, you're going to want to try to, research your market, research your opportunity, come up with some reasonable, forecasts for what you think you can do. But, if you don't have any real detail yet, then you're really just talking about a number. And so there are companies out there that will do 409A valuations, that's something that becomes absolutely necessary later on. But essentially what it normally boils down to is, the founders and the board of the company taking all the information that they have into account, coming up with a good faith estimate, and then negotiating that with the investor and coming to an agreement. In all honesty, a lot of times what happens is the investor has a range of a size of check. Let's say they're going to write checks from $500,000 to $3 million, and they have a range of the percentage of the company that they want to own after the deal is done. And they agree on the amount of money they're going to put in. They agree on the percentage of the company they're going to have at the end. And then they kind of back into what the pre-money value of the company needs to be in order to make those things true. It's kind of backwards, but that is, at least in my experience, been reality many times. So talk about voting rights and protective provisions. Normally in a venture deal, in a preferred stock deal, the investor is not coming in and buying a majority interest in the company. They're buying a minority interest, which typically, if they were buying common stock, would mean they have voting rights, but they don't have any ability to actually affect any change, which is one of the reasons why investors typically won't buy common stock. So with a minority investor who's buying preferred stock, they might have the right to put a director on the board themselves. The majority of the investors get to choose one director or more directors. And then there's other protective provisions around voting rights that would allow those investors, even though they're a minority, to have either consent rights over certain types of transactions or actions that the company takes, or maybe veto rights over the same things. You can't raise more money, you can't sell more stock, you can't borrow certain amounts of money, you can't sell the company. All those types of things are pretty normal to see in a preferred stock deal in favor of the investors. Liquidation preference is really it's a very common concept in these deals. Basically, the investors have some protection that allows them to get their money back, or it's usually a 1x liquidation preference, meaning they get the amount of money they invested in back before the common stockholders or founders get anything out of an exit. The non-participating or participating piece is kind of connected with the liquidation preference. So typically what I see is a 1x liquidation preference with non-participating preferred stock. And what that means is the investors have the right at an exit to choose whether to get their money back, or they can be treated as if they had common stock and share in the sale. And so they'll just do whatever's best for them. If it's a great exit, then they're going to be treated like they have common stock. If it's not so great an exit, they'll take their money back. That's typically the way I see it, but that can be, it could be more than a 1x liquidation preference. It could be participating preferred stock, but the earlier stage deals tend to be 1x non-participating. And then preemptive rights are basically the right of those investors to have to buy into later rounds. So maybe they have the right to keep their ownership percentage by continuing to invest as the company goes later and later into its path. Typical documents you're going to see in a preferred stock round are the restated charter that gets filed with the state, usually Delaware, stock purchase agreement, investor rights agreement, right of first refusal, and co-sale agreement and voting agreement. Those 5 are very standard. They're in almost every preferred stock deal. And then sometimes you'll see side letters or management rights letters or other things that certain investors will negotiate for specifically. In terms of the 3 types of securities we're going to talk about, preferred stock is the most complex. It costs the most to get it done. It takes the most amount of time. So that's kind of preferred stock in a nutshell. You could talk all day about preferred stock. There's a million different variations, and they can take a life of their own depending on what the negotiations are. So the next slide we're going to talk about is
Jesse, real quick. I wanted to pause there real quick if anyone has any questions on preferred stock. And then Jim here on YouTube's asking if there's any PDFs, maybe example documents that you guys have that you could send people. I know
Sure.
We're going to be sending out an email tomorrow for everyone.
Yeah.
If there's any, I don't know if you want to include some of these typical documents. I know you're going to get into the other types of rounds that people could get, but I wanted to pause there if anyone has any questions on preferred stock specifically.
Yeah, so PDF, we will be sending out some additional information that, we've got a bunch of content on our website that's all free. You can download it, and we've got, more in-depth information about different financing types and stuff like that. In terms of form documents that you can look at, I'm going to put a comment in the section in the comments here.
Okay.
I think I can do that, or do I have to do it as a private chat? Maybe I do.
Yeah, if you do it as a private chat, I can move you over to get out on the social channels.
Okay, I just sent that out. There's a group out of DC called the National Venture Capital Association, and they provide most of the time when we're doing preferred stock, those are the documents we're starting with, because those documents are well known and accepted by investors and founders and lawyers and everybody else that are involved in these deals. So they're also annotated, which can be really, really helpful if it's the first time you've thought through some of this content. So throw that link up there. I would definitely check that out, because they're great documents, and those are what you're probably going to see.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I just shared that out. Wonderful. Yeah, and then in general, preferred stock, those are going to be, involved mostly later on after someone has already raised probably their first or second round of funding, right?
Yeah, typically, you sometimes will see preferred stock at the first round, but I see that less and less. It's too expensive in both terms of time and money to make it worth it usually. So yeah, it's definitely, your second, third round and beyond is probably going to be preferred stock, but the first one might be, but it probably won't be. It would probably be more likely to be some kind of convertible.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that. And okay, I think we can continue on.
Okay. Great. All right. So the next slide here is on convertible notes. One of the things that is important to understand is a convertible note really is debt. There's a maturity date, and there's usually an interest rate. It is debt. It goes on the books as debt, but it's not intended to ever actually be repaid. The whole point of it is to convert into equity at some point later. And so one of the big benefits to convertible securities in general is that you don't have to negotiate what the current value of the company is, which can really kind of help shortcut a lot of discussion and negotiation. Because especially at the earliest stages, like we said, we don't really know what the company's worth. It's really just a negotiation over a number. So convertible notes convert, obviously, and they'll either convert on what's called a qualified financing, which is usually defined in the note itself as a financing of a certain amount or more. They might convert at the option of the investors on some kind of financing that's not a qualified financing, and there might also be a conversion option in there at maturity if the company has not raised money prior to that date. So notes will convert on either a discount or a cap. A discount is pretty simple to understand. It's basically a discount on whatever the price per share is in the next preferred stock round. And a cap is essentially a maximum limit ceiling on the value of the company that will be used to determine the conversion price for those notes. So it could be, that's really to protect the note investors from you going out as the founder to someone who doesn't know how to value a company and put some ridiculous valuation on it that greatly reduces the amount that those note holders are able to get for the investment that they made. So what happens at maturity? There's really four possibilities. One is the notes will convert before then, or they might convert at maturity. Two is the maturity date might get pushed out. Three is the company might be done, and that might be the end of it. Four is the notes technically could be repaid, but I think I may have seen convertible notes repaid once. It's just not normal. The typical documents for convertible notes is much less than a preferred stock deal. There's a note purchase agreement, there's a convertible promissory note, and that's basically it. I find them to be the simplest of the three types of transactions, but they're definitely less costly in terms of money and time than a preferred stock deal, but they usually take a little bit longer and cost a little bit more than safes, which is what we're going to talk about next. So moving to that slide, again, a safe is, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick, we have a few questions coming in, and I think this question is actually going to be relevant also for safes. Talking about, someone's asking about what's a typical discount. I know from the safes that we've done with our investors and stuff, it seems like most industry standards is around 20% discount. Is that what you've seen as well? And what do you typically see in rounds?
Yeah, I would say if you're asking for just a general percentage, 20% is pretty typical. It kind of depends on how long it's intended to be outstanding. So if the maturity date is like 30 months out or something, it might be on the higher end of a discount. If it's only intended to be out there for 6 months, it might be lower. And then I've also seen notes that will sort of change the discount depending on how long it goes. And that's just to really compensate those investors for coming in significantly earlier.
Gotcha. Okay, great. There's a couple other questions. Another one we got by Jim. Do I need an attorney before I start doing pitches to angel groups? I definitely recommend to other entrepreneurs that they do have an attorney. There's a lot, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start working with you guys and everything on this stuff too, is because there's so much like digital law stuff now that you can go on and get an LLC or whatever and set up your company online, which is okay if you just need, like, if you're just trying to do a very simple LLC and you're not raising money and building a real company and whatever else. And those are great for some things. And if you don't have a budget, whatever. But most of the time, if you're building a startup, tech company, any type of growth company where you plan on hiring people, raising money, all of that, you need a lawyer so that you can email, talk to, knows your business, knows you, and you can contact whenever, and they understand where you're at, what you're doing, and can help you on that. If you do it online or you don't have that point of contact, it's going to be really hard, and you're going to be scrambling around when these things come into fruition, right? So I don't know what's your take on, whether people should really get lawyers before they start really doing pitches and stuff like that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too.
Yeah, well, thank you for making my sales pitch for me, Michael.
Of course.
No, but in reality, I mean, if you've done it before and you kind of know what you need to have, you probably can go ahead and start kind of setting meetings up. But I would definitely suggest you talk to an attorney that works in these types of transactions as early as possible.
Yeah.
Especially if you've never done it before, you definitely should do that. Absolutely. Just because you're not going to know what you're walking into. There's a ton of information and good information out there on the internet and in books and stuff. But if I was a founder who was trying to go pitch in front of an investor, I would certainly want to make sure I have my ducks in a row and put the best foot forward, first impression, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we have another quick question here. This is kind of pertaining to some of the valuation stuff that you were mentioning, the 409A evaluations. I know we sent the National Venture Capital Association link. Do they have any good resources on that, or are there any other resources that you would recommend for people trying to figure out how do they value their company right at the early stages?
Sure. The best one I know of is called PitchBook. And it's a subscription service, but I think you can get I think they release their, I don't know if they're quarterly, I don't remember, they're not monthly, but they're either quarterly, they might even be just annually, but they release certain reports with statistics and stuff that I find to be really, really good. The subscription is really expensive, so it depends on what you really need it for, but that is definitely good information. Yeah,
I know Carta is good as well. Carta.com. They have some cap table management stuff. Gust Launch is good as well. And there's a lot of other resources. I know some of the banks are doing this stuff too. First Republic Bank, Silicon Valley Bank, the banks that are more geared towards startups and stuff are helping with this sort of thing as well. So you can check those out as well. And then I don't know if you're planning to get into this later or not, but we have someone here asking about warrants as well. It's kind of like a type of a note in some senses. But I didn't know if you wanted to touch on that real quick, or if you're seeing any of that in the market now.
Yeah, we don't really see warrants all that much. I don't have anything in this deck about warrants. But typically, warrants they're kind of like an option to purchase a share. But where you used to see them a lot was before whoever it was came up with convertible notes. You used to see investors actually making a kind of standard loan to a company and then also getting warrants. And that kind of got combined into what is now a convertible note. But we really don't see warrants all that often, unless, I have seen them in situations where companies are actually getting bank loans where, the bank might be a recipient of warrants, or maybe some kind of one-off situation where a service provider is getting some kind of equity. It might be done in warrants for some reason. But it's typically like a sweetener to a loan, or it's kind of like a quasi compensation tool.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then real quick before we move on, we got one more that's relevant. Jake is asking about what happens to convertible notes if your business fails or isn't profitable.
Yeah, so it's very, very unusual that they carry like a personal guarantee or anything. And it's also pretty unusual that they would be secured. Although I have seen that sometimes where it's secured by some kind of asset that the company has. So in 95 or 99% of the cases, I mean, if the company fails, the investors are out their money. Everybody loses in that case. But as a debt instrument, whatever value there is to the company, if it fails, they would be ahead of the common stockholders because it's debt.
Right.
But yeah, if the company fails, typically the investors are just out their money and everybody kind of loses.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's have you move on to safes there.
Sure. Okay. All right. So safes. Before we get into this, there are two primary different types of safes. One is kind of like the original safe, which really the best way to describe that, the simplest way, is it's essentially a convertible note, but there's no repayment obligation, there's no maturity date, there's no interest rate, and it's not debt. It's really just a right to get equity at some future time. Again, the acronym is a simple agreement for future equity. So that's what investors have negotiated for. The last maybe year and a half or so, there's been a new type of safe called a post-money safe, which is a little bit different and gives a little bit more visibility into exactly how much of the company the founders are selling as they're selling safes to people. With a pre-money safe or a convertible note, you can kind of determine, sort of using some hypothetical, situations, how much you've sold of the company, but it's very dependent on what happens in the next round, and you obviously don't know the future, so you can't really pin it down. But either way, they are, whether it's a post-money or a pre-money safe, it's not debt. There's no maturity date, there's no repayment obligation. Also, so safe preferred stock, I wanted to mention this because this is a concept that's actually kind of started to bleed back into convertible notes. So in terms of history, we used to have loans that people got warrants with, which I mentioned a minute ago. Then it got into convertible notes, and then safes kind of evolved. And so this safe preferred stock idea is actually going back into convertible notes now, where the safe will convert at the next financing, but it converts into a shadow series of preferred, and that goes all the way back to what we were talking about, the liquidation preference. The liquidation preference is typically 1x, and so each investor will get however much money they paid for each share back in the liquidation preference. So if you're selling stock for $1, you get $1 per share back at the end. So safe preferred stock would say, okay, that's fine, but the safe investors didn't pay $1 per share. They paid, maybe it was a 20% discount. They paid 80 cents per share. And so this safe preferred stock that you get will be the same as the preferred stock that you're selling now, except for the liquidation preference of the safe preferred stock will be equal to whatever the conversion price was instead of the full value preferred stock. And that's to avoid, giving a built-in return to those safe investors if the company does not do well. Anyway, that's kind of complicated. I'm happy to expound on that, but I wanted to mention it because I see that all the time now. Typical documents for a safe transaction are the safe itself, which is like a 5-page document, and sometimes a pro rata rights letter, depending on whether it's a pre-money or a post-money safe. They used to be the simplest thing in the world. They are still pretty simple, but with the addition of this post-money safe, it's gotten a little bit more complicated to make sure everybody's talking about the same thing. But typically, it is the cheapest, fastest way to get money into an early stage company. The next couple of slides, I'm not going to go over this. I think this is helpful, hopefully, and it'll be included in what goes out in the email. But this just kind of compares the three different things that we have talked about, and I think that'll be helpful, hopefully for people. Then I've only got a couple more slides here, which is good. So I think we're starting to run out of time. But what can you do to increase your chances? This kind of goes back to the question that was asked about whether or not you should have an attorney before you start pitching. Part of this answer does anyway. But really, I think the first thing to do is define success. So knowing how much money you're trying to raise, what it's for. Maybe it involves getting a particular investor involved because they have experience in the industry that you're in, or they have connections, or they're going to be otherwise helpful in addition to the dollars that they bring to the table. Getting your books and records in order, that's something that an attorney and an accountant will be really, really helpful with. And that's always better to have those things kind of set and in order before you walk in and start talking to investors. Being realistic is very important. The adage is basically it takes twice as long to raise half the money that you want. It's important to be realistic on the pre-money valuation of the company. If you're doing a preferred stock raise, you don't want to undersell. You don't want to be selling the company for less than it's worth. But honestly, I've seen founders get themselves into more trouble by having a valuation that's too high. Because really what you want is to be building the story of continual increased value. And if you have a round that's just overvalued, it's going to get corrected at some point, and that can lead to difficult conversations and transactions later. And then lastly, prepare a term sheet, or at least know what you want if your investors ask you. You should always be prepared to give an answer that makes sense and is based on what your plan is. And so you can take a term sheet with you if you want to. A lot of investors will provide you with a term sheet, and it's up to you to kind of review it with your attorney and get back to them with any changes. But those are a couple of things you can do to kind of boost your chance of finding some capital.
Fantastic. Thanks for going through this. One thing I wanted to add in here real quick while we're on the subject of term sheets and stuff. Have you seen, because it can kind of work both ways, right? Do you see most of the time founders needing to actually have term sheets ready to go and send in to investors, or is it mostly the other way around? Because I've seen it both ways. I heard about it both ways. From my understanding, most of the time, the investors are the ones sending the founders the term sheets, and then obviously the negotiations begin.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the investor. If you're dealing with professional VCs on Sand Hill Road, they're going to give you a term sheet. There's no question about that. If they want to invest, they're going to give you a term sheet. You're not going to have to bring it to them.
Right.
But if it is your first round of financing and you're raising, $500,000 or less or something like that, and you're going around to people who are, novice or quasi-professional investors, you are probably going to want to try to control the conversation because, they may not even really know what to give you. It really depends on sort of what stage you're at and what investors you're talking to. But nevertheless, it's not going to hurt to have a term sheet, or at least have in your mind, what you think would be sort of acceptable. I think I've got two more slides here. Okay. Sorry, Michael. Did you want to do something else?
There's one more thing too that we have a question here from. Kind of getting back to, I know you covered this on some of your previous slides about the pro rata rights. She wants to maybe maybe dive into that a little bit deeper.
Sure.
What would be in that? What should founders be looking for or be aware of?
Yeah. So the pro rata rights letter, it depends on what type of safe you're using. In the original like pre-money safe, the safe investors had built-in pro rata rights, but they were confusing because you couldn't calculate what percentage of the company they owned until the next financing was done, because it was all dependent on the price of the next round and all that other stuff. And so in the old version of the safe, those pro rata rights were built into the safe, but they applied to the next round, not the round in which the safe's actually converted. But so if you did a safe round and then they all converted in your Series A round, the pro rata rights provided to the safe investors actually applied to the Series B. And that was confusing to everybody. But it had to be that way because you couldn't calculate what the pro rata rights should be in the round that the safes were converting into. And so in the post-money safe, the new version, they took out those built-in pro rata rights, but they actually also provided and I should have mentioned this before, that the safe is a standard document that's put out by Y Combinator. If you Google, I don't have the link for it, but if you Google, Y Combinator safe, it will pull up the safe document. It'll pull up a primer that kind of goes into detail about why and how and when these safes are used. And then it also gives you the form safe, and it gives you for the new form of safe this optional pro rata rights letter. And that works a little bit better because number one, it doesn't give it to all safe investors. And number two, you can calculate what percentage of the company the safe investors should be entitled to purchase in the round that the safes convert in, because it's a post-money safe.
Yeah, I just dropped the link in the Y Combinator.
Right. Perfect.
There's another, Gus has some good stuff on safes as well. But thank you for that question. And yeah, let's get into, I think you were going to go through some COVID stuff here real quick, and then we'll get into any final questions for everybody too.
Yeah, you can't have a workshop or presentation these days without mentioning COVID, so I need to do that. This is actually the last substantive slide. So the question is, how has COVID changed venture financing? I think you're going to see that funds that have been around for a while might tighten up a little bit because they want to make sure they conserve cash for their existing, companies. I don't think that means that they're going to stop doing deals, but if it was a fund that was supposed to do 15 deals or something and they've got 3 left, it might take them a year instead of 4 months to do those next 3. I think investors are going to start really hunting for companies that are good deals. So I expect terms to kind of swing a little bit more in favor of investors. I think that that more maybe a higher percentage of these companies are going to be, that very first slide we talked about why you raise money. That I think that a lot of companies are going to be in a position where they have to do it for survival. Maybe they raised enough money under the circumstances that existed 5 months ago, but now their revenues dried up or whatever's happened. It's not going to give them the runway that they thought they had. So I think you're going to see terms kind of swing in favor of investors a little bit. But honestly, I don't know. I really don't. It's too early to say. I think I'm still bullish on startups in general. I think that overall, things will be good, but I don't know what's going to happen over the next year or two. I think things will change, but I can't really answer it for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, but I think you just have to adapt, with everything going on. If you have to pivot, and I think the companies that survive, there's going to be a boatload of money waiting for them because there's probably going to be not that many people starting companies, and all the existing companies that have gotten money aren't getting more, or they're going out of business. So all the startups that survive this next year or two, they're going to be collecting all of the venture funding now. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. That's what we're here for. We're trying to help people. We're trying to connect people to investors, to lawyers, to help with all these things as well. But yeah,
it's funny. I saw, I don't remember where this was that I saw it, but somebody, it's even more widely known than I know, but somebody started talking about, instead of unicorns, started talking about camel startups.
Yeah.
And, companies that don't need to drink from the money well for, a year. We'll see what happens. I actually think that we might see a spike in new company creation, because so many people have lost jobs that there might not be any other option but for them to kind of go do what they can do. I don't know if that's going to be like tech startups. I guess it might be. It depends on how many engineers and people start getting laid off. But
yeah,
we'll see. I'm interested to see what happens, but I don't have the answers yet.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. I just have the slides down right now as we get into. If anyone has any other questions, now is the time to ask them as we wrap up here. And it looks like I don't see any. I think we answered all of them from the ones that people were asking on the site here and everything. I know you wanted to maybe give out some prizes, give out some shirts to some of the people watching. So if you have some questions prepared, and we'll just kind of the first person that we see either on social or on the website here to answer it is going to be getting some free gear.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions. I was prepared just in case we didn't have questions at the end. So here's an official Fourscore T-shirt. I've got them in different sizes and colors, and so we're going to have to figure out how to get your mailing address or whatever. But we'll get that, and whoever answers these questions first will be the proud recipient of a T-shirt. All right. So first question: what does the acronym SAFE stand for? I think I mentioned that 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I actually put it in the chat at the very beginning. So hopefully, let's see who's gonna win this first one. This is
they are very, very, very soft shirts. I think you will not be disappointed.
Okay, so let's see who's gonna be first here. You're gonna get a shirt of your size.
Right. You may even get the color you want.
What are all the different colors we have here?
Oh man, we have a ton of stuff. We have we got the gray, we've got green, we have red, we have blue. It's a full array.
All right, let's see who was first. Okay. Here we go. We got it. All right. Oh, this person doesn't have their name. I need their name here. They're coming up just as a site visitor. All right. Okay. We got Garrett. It looks like Garrett was first on YouTube. So Garrett, if you can, I'll drop my email in here. Jesse's email, you should be able to see his on the bottom there. But if you shoot me an email, we'll get your info over to Jesse, and then we'll figure out a way to send you the T-shirt. Do we have another one? Do we have another one to give out here?
I do. I've got 2 more questions if we've got people to answer them.
Okay.
All right. Which of the 3 types of financings we discussed was the most complex?
Most complex financing.
Yes, correct. We had preferred stock, we had convertible notes, and we had safes. Those are the 3 possibilities.
All right. It looks like there has been a slight delay. So so that's why, because what happened was I was like, where's everyone at? And then they all came in at the same time.
Luck of the draw.
So one person had to refresh the chat. Most complex. All right. Okay, here we go. All these people, I can't see their. Oh wait, here we go. Yeah, we have Laura. All right, from our website from New York. All right, Laura, I'm gonna message you my email here. She was first here at 5:56. All right. Okay, so Laura from New York got the second one. Garrett has the first one. Laura, I'm sending you my email now. Just send me an email with your name, saying that you won, and just your contact information, so we can send you the shirt, and I'll introduce you to Jesse too. And for the last final shirt, be ready.
Last and final. Okay. What is one reason that a founder might choose to raise outside capital? We talked about 3 of them at the beginning of the presentation.
Okay. So one reason why a founder would want to raise outside capital.
Yes. Yep.
Right. Let's see who's got the trigger finger. Who has it? All right. Let's see. All right, it looks like Lance is first. All right, Lance.
Oh, there he is. Lance. Right.
Right. Yeah, they all come in at the same time. All right. Lance, you are first, sir. So, Lance, send me an email, and we will get that shirt over for you. All right. I think that's it. I actually like this T-shirt idea. We will probably start doing this for. I don't know if I have any Entre here. I think it's all in New York, because that's usually where we give out the shirts at our events. I wonder if I have any. Oh, you know what? I do have one here. It's an entrepreneur shirt.
Nice.
So it is an XL, but it will probably shrink. So we can give out one more here.
Is it made out of milk?
What's that?
Is it made from milk?
It is not. It is cotton. Yeah, it's actually 100% cotton. But we'll give out one more, and it's gonna be. So I want to do it. What we can do is I'm gonna just do this on the fly here. All right. So so Jesse's law firm, they have multiple locations, but where did he say at the beginning they're primarily based out of, and where he's at right now? So this is, if you say the state, that's fine. And let's see who was paying attention at the beginning. So
that's a tough one. I said that at the very beginning.
I don't know if people were paying attention. So if it was too difficult, then we'll ask another one that more pertains to to the shirts here. All right. Let's give it a minute. Does anyone remember where Jesse's law firm is from, or where they're recorded at? Okay, well, we have someone, North Carolina, but their name is SNYC. So I don't know what SNYC. I don't know your whole name, but congratulations, you were the first one. And just shoot me an email, and we'll get you out this entrepreneur shirt. So we're gonna, this is actually a great idea, because I actually want to start doing this at some of our other events too, and giving out some shirts to people. But that pretty much does it. I think we're wrapped up on time here. Jesse, thank you so much. If you want to sign off, where people find you? If you want to get connected with him, where can people? how should people reach out to you if they want to learn more or talk to you or talk to your other lawyers on your team?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you can put my screen back up, but I've got sort of one final slide on here that might be a good place to end on that note. So here's we have a ton of stuff on our website. We're proud of our content and have kind of developed all of it on our own. But there's a PDF that'll come around. I guess Michael will send it out tomorrow to everybody that has links to all this stuff. But by all means, take a look at our website. You can contact us through that. You can email me at the email on the ticker there. But FourscoreLaw.com is the website. And just feel free to kind of look around and find some things that are valuable. One thing I'm very excited about that we just started that's not even on this slide yet is we have a new video series in our resources page. It's just simply called Briefs. I take a look at that. I think those are going to be really good. And we're going to continue to add content to that. So I'll let you look at it to see what it is. But I will sign off with that. Michael, thanks so much for having me.
Let's pull you back up here. Yeah, no, I mean, it was great. I think that this information, there's so much that goes into all this stuff, but it's just so important to understand this as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as you raise money, that you understand all of this stuff when you're talking to investors, because it makes you look, a lot better in their eyes as well, if you know what you're talking about. And then also having lawyers that, you can go to for these kind of questions and stuff too, because this stuff's also changing all the time, especially with the SBA loans coming out and all sorts of different things. Thank you, Jesse, so much. This was awesome. And definitely, check out their website, shoot them an email. We're going to be sending out some of the PDFs and stuff in the thank you email tomorrow. But if you guys need any other information, please shoot us an email. Please shoot Jesse an email. Reach out, get connected, and thank you guys. This was awesome.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
All right, you got it. Take care, Jesse.
Thanks, everybody.
See everybody. Yep. Thanks so much.
Bye.